Actually, there were two legendary broadcasters in town. Pat Fleming was at the competing radio station, WDBQ, and Red McAleese, who was a Hall of Fame broadcaster, played baseball at Northwestern, was an outstanding player at Northwestern. Red was at my station, KDTH. Well, Red was getting on in age, getting on in years. He decided to cut back on his duties as play-by-play man. And then Pat and I got together. Pat worked at KDTH later, and we got together, and he would do play-by-play, and I would be the analyst or the color commentator. If he couldn't do a game, I'd jump into the play-by-play seat. And ultimately, Pat left the radio station and went to work for Mercy Hospital here in Dubuque as their director of fundraising. And so I assumed the play-by-play role, but Pat would still do color with me. And then Pat's son, Tim Fleming, who now is a big-time broadcaster over in Mason City, would be my analyst. So that's how we got started with Packer baseball. I remember one night we were doing a game, and the entire right side of the, I'm talking the parking lot, the bleachers, all the way out to the outfield fence, the lights went out. So we only had half the light standards that were working. And it obviously was a major problem, as they later found out. Some huge circuit blew. So we tried to do the game with the agreement of both teams with half the lights. I couldn't even see the pitch. You know, the press box was way up on top of the stands right behind home plate. I could see about half the pitch, and then it would disappear into the darkness at home plate. So I'd go, there's a pretty good-looking fastball, Tim, and that looked like a knuckleball or a curveball. I had no idea what it was. In fact, I could barely see the umpire either signaling strike or ball. Had no idea what the count was because half the scoreboard was out. So we had to keep our own count. That was one of the more memorable nights. And then ultimately, because of liability and for fear that somebody might get hit in the head with a pitch and not see it coming, they called the game off. Where every year you could count on a couple of fish fly invasions. And when that happened, you know, you're not going to stop the game. We'd play through the mayfly invasion at Petrakis Park. And you know, I remember one night where, again, you could hardly see. Try and throw a pitch, try and throw an 80-mile-an-hour fastball through millions of fish flies that are flying. And of course, they're attracted by light. So you can only imagine a baseball park lit up to the hilt, and the river just 50 feet that away. As soon as those babies hatched, they were heading for Petrakis Park. And so for a couple years, it was a pool team, a pool minor league team. In other words, Texas would send 5 players, and Houston would send 6 players, and the Padres would send 6 players, and maybe the Twins would send, several major league teams contributed players to form a team. And that lasted a couple years. There's a reason Field of Dreams was filmed here. It's because it's one of the more unique areas of the country where all of these town teams, these smaller town teams, support a semi-pro baseball team. So they build their ballparks to minor league ballpark specifications. I mean, at Cascade, as an example, is like 320 to 330 down the lines. That's as long or longer than most major league ballparks today. It's 400 feet to straightaway center. So they were more than adequate for minor league dimensions. Dyer's, you know, I don't know if he was a scout for Toronto or Montreal, or he was kind of a pool scout. In other words, he would just drive around and find players. Okay. And so he's driving around Canada in the middle of the night, you know, dark, trying to find players. He thought, well, I'll go to a few high school games and see if I can find some players. And he's out in the middle of nowhere. He's going from like one big city to the next, and he sees these ballpark lights on in the distance of this small town, Saskatchewan or wherever. So, I'll just drive over there. So he drove over there, and Terry Poole's playing for his high school team. That's how he found games. It was 30 or 40 home games and 30 or 40 road games. And there were a few years where we did all the games, you know, and that gets to be a grind. We got to go to great cities like Danville and Waukesha and Appleton and Burlington, Iowa, Cedar Rapids and Waterloo. I mean, great cities, you know, that triangle of rivalries there. So those were some fun times. So all your wonderful personalities who were very good at football and basketball got their start in baseball. And that just didn't happen by accident. Baseball is the ideal radio game because you get 10 to 20 seconds in between pitches, which can be 30, 40 pitches an inning, or a half an inning. And so you got all kinds of time to talk about the fish flies and talk about, you know, it's nickel beer night or nickel hot dog night, or you can talk about spoke to the Chamber of Commerce luncheon today, or